Tonight, President-elect Trump revealing he has not spoken with Vladimir Putin since his victory as he receives a flood of calls from world leaders. The Russian president, though, publicly praising Trump for his bravery during the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Putin speaking today saying, quote, he behaved, in my opinion, in a very correct way, courageously, like a real man. Fred Pleitgen is out front.
After launching a massive attack aimed at the heart of Kyiv, Russian leader Vladimir Putin praising President-elect Donald Trump. I would like to take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on his election as President of the United States, Putin says. So you're willing to talk to Trump, the moderator asks. Yes, we're ready, Putin says. Indeed, President-elect Trump seems willing to talk to Putin as well. Legendary journalist Bob Woodward writing in a recent book that the two men have had a number of phone calls, up to 7, since Trump left office. Trump reportedly gifting Putin COVID tests in the early days of the pandemic when those tests were scarce. And Trump himself has often praised his relations with the Russian president, even siding with Vladimir Putin over the U.S.'s own intelligence services after Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
As Russia continues its full-on invasion of Ukraine, gaining ground especially on the Eastern Front, the president-elect still saying he'd be able to end the war fast.
They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done in 24 hours.
If we had a real president, the president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine.
But the Ukrainians fear Trump might cut off military aid to Ukraine altogether, forcing the country into a de facto surrender and loss of territory.
Every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he walks away with $100 billion. I think he's the greatest salesman on earth. But we're stuck in that war unless I'm president.
And when pressed to answer whether he even wants Ukraine to win the war, Trump simply won't say.
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives.
And you know, Aaron, Russian leader Vladimir Putin also saying that if Donald Trump were to call him and say, hey, Vladimir, let's meet up, he certainly wouldn't be averse to doing that. In general, the Russians are saying that they are looking for countries to call them and reestablish relations. Aaron?
All right, Fred, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Fareed Zakaria, host of Fareed Zakaria GPS. So Fareed, Trump wins, Putin comes out and hails a, quote, completely new world order. Is it?
Well, what Putin was talking about there was a completely new world order in which American power is declining, in which Western power is declining, and as he sees it, Russia and China and countries like Iran are ascendant. So it's a very particular version of a new world order, and I would find it very difficult to imagine that any American president would sign on to that new world order.
So I guess in that context, Fareed, how do you see the relationship between Trump and Putin? Right, where Trump has so often, even recently, touted his relationship, his friendship, his with Vladimir Putin.
So I think that Trump often talks about it exactly as you say, Aaron, and he talks about the war and how he wants to end it, which all sounds great, and of course we would all like to see the war end. But what I think is often missing in the way Trump talks about it is Vladimir Putin has launched the most blatant act of aggression in Europe since World War II. He has attempted a kind of reconquest of an empire of a kind that hasn't taken place in 70 years. He's trying to essentially wipe Ukraine off the map. He's engaged in the kind of cross-border aggression that the United States said after World War II would not be legitimized, would not be tolerated. And every president since then has maintained that standard. And there have been actually almost no cases of acquisition of territory by conquest that was legitimized by the international community. So the question is, does Does President-elect Trump see that that is the light in which you have to look at Vladimir Putin? Yes, he's a strong leader. He's a powerful interlocutor, I would argue an adversary, but he's not your pal. He's not somebody with whom you're just schmoozing. It's somebody who has done something that is about to destroy the international system. And you have to solve the problem, stand up to him. It doesn't mean that you can't make concessions to him, but that's the kind of broader political context, perhaps even moral context, in which you have to approach Putin.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that would, of course, be an incredible shift were that to occur. Now, former President Obama, spoke out about the election, and he said, Fareed, America has been through a lot over the past few years, from a historic pandemic and price hikes resulting from the pandemic to rapid change, and the feeling a lot of folks have that no matter how hard they work, treading water is the best they can do. Those conditions have created headwinds for Democratic incumbents around the world, and last night showed that America is not immune. Obviously, you've seen this in far-right governments that have been elected across Europe. They're ascendant right: Germany, Austria, France, Portugal, Belgium, you name it. I remember having a meeting at the White House 18 months ago, and they were pulling out all these polls when they were talking about Biden's reelection chances, showing the affinity that the public has across Europe. And at that time, it was all but one country, they said, for a strongman, autocratic type of leader. Is it really happening everywhere?
Well, it is happening everywhere, but it's not always an affinity for a strongman autocratic leader. It is just a certain people are fed up. They feel they feel like the world is in turmoil. Inflation got out of control, and so they punished incumbents. The best example is, we're closest in a sense politically to Great Britain, and the Tory party, the Conservative Party, went from probably the largest majority they had had in 75 years to the smallest minority they had in 75 years in one election. That seems almost impossible to imagine. In Japan, the LDP, which has ruled Japan essentially uninterruptedly since the late 1940s, has just lost. So there's a lot of anti-incumbency, but I think it's also fair to say that the Democrats played this, in my opinion, not as well as they could have, and Trump played it very well.
You're being, of course, diplomatic in that. I mean, I don't know if you heard Van Jones, Andrew Yang earlier talking about the issue. Can I just ask you, though, to that point, Fareed, do you think that this was inevitable, that Trump was going to win as an inevitable thing against any Democrat? Or do you think that the candidate, specifically who it was, Kamala Harris, or her position as being the vice president of the incumbent, do you think that drove it more?
I think it's not Kamala Harris as a person or as a candidate. I think being the vice president hurt because you are tarred with being part of the government. And if people are looking for change, it would have been easier for people to look for change if it was whomever, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, you could imagine many people. But I will say there were decisions that were made that, that the Democrats made that they have to live with. Not cracking down early on immigration. It was absolutely clear the immigration system was collapsing. The asylum system was broken. And you could see that around the world, right-wing populism was being fed by immigration. Yeah. And there were lots of people, if I may point out, I myself kept pointing out that you've got to take a much harder line on immigration. That is the number one issue that the public thinks is out of control. So I think that played a large part. I also think the Democrats have gotten trapped in a kind of identity politics bubble where they were not able to see categories outside of it. So they were not able to appeal to working class Hispanics as anything other than Hispanics. And those people began to move toward Trump because they're also socially conservative. Maybe they like his kind of machismo. Whatever it is, the identity politics trap has placed Democrats in a very strange position of, reversing Martin Luther King's line. They're judging people by the color of their skin, not the content of their character.
Yeah. All right. Well, Fareed, thank you very much.